It's me once again with another update, another blog of The Walking Dead episode 5, season 6, called Now. I just got to tell you, there's spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen this episode, don't don't play me. Just watch the episode first, then watch me. It all started. Deanna, still in shock over the loss of her husband and her son close together. She was on the walls of Alexandria, and she saw a plaque that reminds her of her husband, Reg Monroe. And eventually, and Michonne, she overhears Michonne telling Maggie and Rosita that her and Glenn separated, but eventually Glenn has not come back yet. And eventually, well, I'll get to Maggie's story as soon as I can. Eventually, all they hear is "Open the gate, open the gate, open the damn gate!" And there was Rick running towards the gate, and everybody and Michonne and them open up the gate for him. Quickly locks up the gate, and then all the herd of walkers were just trapped outside the gates of Alexandria. But eventually, Rick um, explained everything, and all of what you saw when closed the gate are the names of the people they lost, like Sturgis and David, and all of them who lost their lives due to the wolves. Eventually, Rick explained everything that Daryl, Sasha, and Abraham have not arrived yet, and they said they'll be coming. And Glenn and Nicholas, who we both all know Nicholas is dead, and Glenn, big question mark. Um, but I have a feeling he's still alive. And then, eventually Aaron stepped up and he said, "I could explain everything. It's all on me." He explained how he and Daryl were caught in a trap in a herd full of walkers. That was a trap, and they tried to escape, and eventually Aaron left his backpack right at the trap. Eventually, one of the wolves found it, and he said it when he saw the knapsack. He realized, saw the photos. He said, "This is my, this is on me," and I don't know, but I've got to fix this somehow. But eventually, we're gonna get to Spencer and Deanna. Like Olivia, I just love Olivia. The people are trying to salvage all kinds of food, whatever's left, and eventually Spencer came in, and like they were arguing, they were complaining, and he just said, "Don't worry, this is all going to work out." But eventually, Deanna was back in the house. She started writing up the plans that Reg was doing before his tragic death. Eventually, she wrote down some weird Italian thing phrase, and I don't know what it's from. It says, "No one is safe." And so eventually, Deanna saw Spencer, her son, and he was pretty drunk. And then they had gone to this huge fight, and Deanna says, Spencer yelled and says, "You know what's bullshit? Pardon my French." And he says, "You let Dad and Abe die. This is all on you." But eventually, Deanna was taken aback, and then Spencer left. Now we're going to get to the story of Maggie and Aaron. Maggie wants to go out and find Glenn because she's very worried about him. She said she had a feeling she hoped he's still alive. But Aaron told him, "I don't want you going out there." And she said, "Try to stop me." But eventually he said, "Okay, if you go, I'll go." So eventually they went out to the walls of Alexandria. They go down a sewer, and eventually there were a few walkers down there. They were both really, really disgusting. And then they got into the gate, like the cage where they tried to escape the sewer, but the sewer was full of walkers. And then eventually, Aaron tried to open the gate, and Maggie says, "No, stop, it's over. It's over. I know I'll never find them. I remember when she burned the picture Glenn gave her because You'll never have to have a picture of me ever again. That's what she told Glenn in the season 4 mid second last episode of the season finale, Us. And eventually she explained like I'm gonna have to live with it, and she told Aaron whatever you did, you have to live with it. And then she lowers the big boom that every fan figured out what was going, why she was staying behind. Like Glenn told her, there's another reason why, and it's true, it's official. Maggie is pregnant. And eventually Aaron went, oh. And Aaron was so happy for her, but eventually she was just scared inside. And eventually, Aaron comforted Maggie. But eventually, I loved the friendship with Maggie and Aaron. I loved how they interacted, and that was a very, very touching scene. Then there was a scene, Jessie, played by Alexandra Breckenridge, the blonde. I don't know about her, but I kind of don't like her. She eventually tried to goes to one of the houses that she tries to see the person. This person who was killed by the wolves came back as a walker, and eventually she got her knife out and then she stabbed her. And there were like witnesses everywhere, Deanna, Olivia, Denise, of all sorts. Eventually, she explained to just explained to the people in Alexandria, says this isn't safe. But we are living is not safe anymore. If you don't fight, you'll die. So then she encourages them to not give up hope and fight or die. Um, eventually, it will come to that. Now, Flora bit, Denise, who's trying to become the surgeon that they needed. She was tending Scott, who had an infection from his bullet wound. And eventually, Tara came back, and she says, she said, Denise admitted to Tara saying, I'm afraid. And Tara goes back saying, it sucks to be afraid. So eventually, like, you'll get it. And like when she tosses the book out of the way, she says, I can't do it. Tara kicks it back to her and says, yes, you can, you gotta find it. So eventually Denise looked it up, and then she said the word hot damn. And so she grabs the needle and eventually sticks it into the infected wound. And then eventually, after she supposedly cured Scott of the infection, I don't know if he'll make it or not, because I do love Scott and I hope he and he'll have more things to come. And she said, hot damn. And she realized she can do this. Even if she doesn't have, if she has experience as a psychologist, she can do it. But Denise, I'm going to give her a few more episodes to prove that she can come out of her shell and be stronger than ever. But the shocking most thing I ever saw was when Tara was sitting on the porch of the house, and Denise walks up to Tara. Tara looks at her, and Denise plants a big wet kiss on Tara, and I'm just like, huh? I'm like, oh my god, like I'm surprised. And like in the comics, Denise is having a relationship with Heath, but eventually they're mixing it. The showrunners are mixing it up quite a bit. They're decided hopefully they're going to make Denise a lesbian or bisexual. And so eventually she sits down and says, it sucks to be afraid. But eventually Tara looks at her and smiles. But eventually that was a good part. Eventually, then there's Jessie trying to communicate with Sam and saying she made him cookies, but eventually he would not come down, but she wants him to bring them up, and she said no. And he says, I can't go down there. Like, it's hard for me being a prisoner when my father was beating you and beating me. Eventually, Sam is still terrified of what's going on, and I don't know how much longer Sam is going to last, but I hope he lasts a bit longer. So eventually, that was it. And then Ron and Carl had a short. meeting. Carl was only in one scene, which is kind of ridiculous. Eventually, I know Carl is 16, like the real live actor who plays in Chandler Riggs. He's 16 years old and he needs to go to high school, and that's what he's doing. Like he's only shooting episodes on when if he's not in school. Eventually, he and Ron, Jesse's son, got into a fight over Enid, saying where is she, and he said, I'm gonna go over the walls to find her. And Carl said, I need your help. You can help me. And then they got into this shoving fight, and then Carl knocks Ron to the ground, and so eventually, so I don't know what's gonna happen because I think there's gonna be a feud between these two, and I have a feeling because since Enid left the walls of Alexandria, they don't know where she is, and eventually Enid will come back at some sort, but I don't know how. And then about Spencer. I like Spencer. He's a good complex character. I like how he relieved Rosita from taking watch over the walls, and eventually he took eventually Rosita left, and then eventually he looked out, and then he started eating some crackers, and eventually, and eventually I know Rosita's really worried about Abraham because they have not come back yet. And eventually there's another part that was was a good part, and some I think it's one thing another thing that I missed that I missed. Eventually it's Rick. Oh, Rick. When Ron went up the wall, he was chatting with Rick and saying talking about Carl and all that, saying what's going on. And then eventually says, "Can you teach me to shoot?" He says, "Okay." He gives him his gun, and eventually he says, "There's your target." And he tried to point at the walker, but he didn't shoot. I don't know. Okay. Um, and then there's one thing when Maggie and Aaron went back to Alexandria, she saw the the memorial wall with Glenn and Nicholas's names on it. And eventually Maggie decided to go up and decided to wipe Glenn's name off the wall because she still has a hunch that he is still alive and still out there. And eventually Aaron came and he decided to wipe Nicholas's name off too. And he said, tells her Aaron is good for a boy or a girl. And eventually it was a very bittersweet moment and it was so lovely. Yeah, eventually. But the biggest thing that when I also Deanna really got charged up when she was walking back, shocked over what all the recent happening. Eventually, she became face to face with one of the walkers, and eventually she dropped the thing, picked up a sharded bottle, and eventually she stabbed the walker right in the heart, and he keeps telling her, no, 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 you've got to hit the brain. It's got to be the brain. Don't you know? Eventually I was flipping out, and then so she started smashing the bottle right in the walker's face, and then Rick came along and then stabbed the living, and stabbed it out of his misery. And eventually Deanna says, I don't want to be afraid anymore. I want to live. And he says, I know you can leave this place. And she says, the only person who can leave this danger is you. So eventually, I guess Rick is going to probably take over Alexander because I don't know how long Deanna is going to last, but eventually I hope she lasts a bit longer. And then, ending was Rick going to see Jesse. And Jesse says well, like last time Rick talked to Jesse, she was trying to bury the wolves, start burying all the wolves, and she said, we don't bury the killers here. We bury them out there. Don't do it. And so eventually they had a bit of a talk, and she said, what about the future? And what's going on? Like, what else do we have? And eventually, every Rishon shipper is going to be, we're so pissed off. including me. Rick planted a big wet kiss on Jessie. They were like making out in her garage, and I'm just like, what? I'm just like, oh, Rick, are you crazy? Are you crazy? You love Michonne. I know you love Michonne. Because I want Rick and Michonne together because they have a lot of chemistry. All the scenes together were very beautiful. Michonne, I love the way Michonne bonded with Carl and in season 4, and so eventually we'll see how that pans out. And in the ending, Deanna walked to the gate, and then she saw the blood on the gate, and we don't know whose blood that is, and that is the some of the highlights of the episode of now. Eventually, it was an okay episode. It was, but except for the two shocking kisses, I'm just like, okay. And like, there's no Morgan, no Carol. Morgan was in it for a bit. Carol was in it for just for a second. Like, come on, like it'll be better if Carol was part of this. And eventually, there was no Sasha, no Daryl, no Abraham, no Eugene, and no Glenn. So eventually, a lot of the cast members, so it was mostly shot, mostly focus was in the aftermath of the Wolves in Alexandria. And eventually, next week on The Walking Dead, spoiler alert, this episode will be called Always Accountable, and it's a Daryl Sasha Abraham episode, and it's the one when Daryl gets into they all get into trouble from the root from trying to lead the Walker herd out, and eventually Daryl is going to be captured at some point, and eventually it's going to be scary, but I know for a fact he's going to get out alive, and both Sasha and Abraham are going to get out alive. And eventually, knowing Norman Reedus, who plays Daryl Dixon, the best hot ass badass on TV, he said there's like he finds this beautiful walker who is gruesome and beautiful, like full of green moss, and it'll harken right back into a Carol moment. But we don't know what it is, but we'll have to watch the episode on Sunday to see what it means. And eventually, I have a feeling, I have faith that Daryl and Carol will finally get together in season 6. So eventually, I can't wait till Sunday night. I want to see how Always Accountable is those, and eventually, I know it's going to be a really good episode because there's only after this, then there's 2 more episodes of the first half of the 6th season, and then we have the mid-season finale in about a couple of weeks so time, and so I'm really looking forward to it. And now a huge spoiler alert. If you all Walking Dead fans have read on the internet that they casted Negan. He will be played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who is a phenomenal actor. I've seen him act in a few roles, and he was very he's a very he was he's a very hard-willed actor. Like he was on Weeds, he was on The Good Wife, Supernatural. He played the Winchester's father, and eventually a lot of fans are like panicking, like scaring like crazy, and like I'm like, oh no, now the shit is getting real. Like, but he won't be until the end of the 6th season. Eventually, in the ending of the season 6 finale of The Walking Dead. So, but I'm sure they won't kill off a main character in the season finale. But I'm sure of that. But people are saying that that Negan, spoiler alert, Negan in the comics, murders Glenn with Lucille, his barbed wire baseball bat. And eventually, I doubt they're going to do it to kill Glenn off that way because everybody knows if you read the comics and the TV show was the same thing as the comic, it'll be like it's they will know what happens. But if that's why the show always spices it up and makes it more entertaining to watch. But a lot of fans say Daryl here say let's hope and pray that Daryl gets Lucille, and eventually I'm just like, oh no, it better not, because Norman Reedus makes all the money. It's a popular show. He's popular with the characters. Everybody loves him. even guy's getting his own docu-series on AMC called Writing with Norman Reedus, which I know will be a great show. So AMC, like, he's still with AMC. He signed on with a new show because if he signed on his docu-series on another network, and then I'm sure that maybe he will be Lucille. But don't get me wrong. I just hope and pray it doesn't happen. And we have it only like above. First, we have to have Carol go canon. So let's cross our fingers. I hope and pray that it does not go out that way because losing Norman Reedus is going to lose a lot of money and lose a lot of viewers. So I'm definitely sure they won't kill him off as of yet. But I'm sure, like, I know no one's safe on The Walking Dead, and I'm sure that if Norman Reedus wanted to leave, it would be his decision. Like if he stopped filming, like he would have like cut his hair and sell things back and not go back to Atlanta and stayed in New York, find another place to live and film his movies and do his photography. Eventually, like that, but eventually, I don't think it's going to go that way. So I'm sure that his fate will be answered hopefully by when the series is over, the end of the series. So, and I know Rick's gonna stay a while because he's the star of the show, so he's the strongest, and Daryl's the strongest, and Carol's the strongest. So I'm hoping and praying that Atlanta 5 will stay alive all through season 6. And I'm glad The Walking Dead's been renewed for season number 7. Congratulations, good job. And Tom Payne, another casting news, which is awesome. He's playing Paul Jesus Monroe, a character which I am looking forward to, and I know he's going to do an awesome job. So I'm very, very happy. So I'm very, very thrilled about it. Thumbs up for that. And Xander Berkeley will be joining at the and like in the second half of season 6. I'm here. He's playing Jeffrey, who is the leader of the Hilltop. So eventually, we're gonna see where it all goes, and eventually, we hope and pray that one of our favorites won't get killed off by Negan right now because it's scaring every Walking Dead fan to death. Okay, so I guess that's about it for my blog. And eventually, if you want to comment on it, feel free to do so. But remember the rules: no bashing, no disrespect of characters, and no rude comments. So this is Jen signing off. Have a great week, and I will see you next week for another blog of the Walking Dead episode, Always Accountable. Good night.